The top 3 seeds are set for the Ivy League tournament with 1 week left to play. How did we get here and what's to come? Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and happy Friday. You are Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Natalie Heavren, and I'm a features writer and the Atlantic 10 beat reporter for The Next. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Today we'll chat all about Columbia, Princeton, and Harvard clinching their berths in the Ivy League tournament, the race for the number 4 seed, as well as what to look out for as the regular season turns into tournament season. Joining me today is The Next managing editor and Ivy League beat reporter, Jenn Hatfield. Welcome, Jen. For the first time, Columbia earned the number 1 seed in the Ivy League tournament. How did that happen, and were you surprised at all?
Yeah, thanks for having me back on, Natalie. Always happy to chat about the Ivy League with you. I was a little bit surprised about Columbia earning the number 1 seed, but I wasn't shocked. And the only reason I was really surprised is last year they graduated arguably the best player in program history in Abby Shue. So anytime you're replacing a player like that, there are going to be questions coming into the next season about how that's all going to work. But at the same time, they returned their next 6 highest scorers behind Abby. So I always knew they had depth. I always knew that they were going to still be pretty darn good. It was just a matter of, kind of players taking incremental jumps and kind of making up for that by committee. And they've definitely done that. For my money, they've got the best big 3 in the league with senior Kitty Henderson, senior Cecilia Collins, and sophomore Riley Weiss. Kitty's been scoring more this season, as well as, doing a great job facilitating and defending and leading that team as she's done for several years. Collins is a super versatile player who they often play as kind of a mismatch. She's a guard, but she often plays the 4 for them, and that creates a bit of a challenging matchup because she can post up smaller guards. She can pull out bigs onto the perimeter. And then Riley Weiss, as a sophomore, has really had a breakout season as a scorer. She's the second highest scorer in the Ivy League, just put up 34 on Princeton a couple weekends ago. So she's kind of rounded out the group and really helped give them a lot of dynamic threats to lean on every game.
And before we talk more about Columbia, in an absolutely wild stat this weekend that I'm absolutely obsessed with, Kitty Henderson and Cecilia Collins recorded triple doubles in consecutive days. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, according to Columbia Athletics, shout out to them for this stat, but that's just the second time in NCAA history that's ever happened. So Kitty started things off with 19 points, 12 rebounds, and 10 assists. And then CC the next day got 16, 10, and 10. So just an incredible accomplishment by those two. Kitty was named Ivy League Player of the Week today on Monday for that accomplishment. And I think just overall it shows how versatile those two players are. For one, like they can impact games in so many ways, whether they're scoring or not. But also just, having different players have triple doubles on back-to-back days, I think says a lot about how this team doesn't depend on just one person to carry the load every day. And that makes them really dangerous that, one day it's Kitty and one day it's Cece and then the next day it's Riley or, on down the line of players who can step up on any given day.
And I know we've talked a lot about this season, last season, all the time, but I don't think we can talk about it enough, just how much the program has continued taking steps forward every year under head coach Megan Griffith.
Yeah, she's really the program has done a 180, that and kind of that undersells it under Megan Griffith, who's an alum and, was there as a player for 4 years and has really has her finger on the pulse of the program for years, even before she became head coach in 2016. Under her leadership, she's kind of kept raising the bar every year for the program. And every year the players keep meeting that higher bar. And so where they are now, they have this culture of winning that they really haven't had in their Division I history until Meg got there. Kitty Henderson right now is the program's winningest player ever. And she hasn't even finished her career, and she's the program's winningest player. And then for the players who are younger than her, she and all of them, like pretty much they only know winning. They don't know what it's like to be at the bottom of the Ivy League. They've never done it. They've been contending for championships every year, making the Ivy League tournament, last year making the NCAA tournament. So that kind of builds on itself. And that's something, we typically talk about in the Ivy League as something that Princeton has. But Columbia's really got that thing rolling to where they have kind of that expectation of winning too, which is super powerful and, gives players confidence that, they can handle it. They've won before and they can win again. So, and kind of part of the way that they've gotten there, is they've been really good in recruiting both incoming first years and transfers, and kind of selling New York City. Like, a lot of players would love to come to school in an Ivy League school and be in New York City, and then being on a basketball team that's going to contend for Ivy League championships and NCAA tournament berths. It's kind of like, what's not to like here? So.
Yeah. And then, taking a step back, what are the keys for Columbia in this last week of the regular season and then heading to Providence for the Ivy League tournament?
Yeah, I think they just have to keep playing how they've been playing, which sounds easy, but is actually really hard. On Saturday, they're going to host Cornell for senior day and to try to clinch the Ivy League title outright, which they haven't done the past 2 years. They've shared it with Princeton. And so they can't, get tight or kind of feel that pressure. They've faced some pressure this season, but it's kind of a different crunch time as we get into, the really like last second decisive games of the season that are going to determine, not only Ivy League championships, but NCAA tournament fate. And the Lions have experience with this. 2 years ago, they were in a position to win a share of the Ivy League title against Cornell, and they really had to grit it out against, a Cornell team that Columbia was better than, had to grit it out and won in overtime, and were kind of tense in the Ivy League tournament too. So it's something that some of them have gone through, and hopefully that's a learning experience for them where they kind of know how to handle it a little bit this time. And I think they can also kind of look back and say that when they played at Brown earlier this season, the site of the Ivy League tournament, they were great. They just out of the gates, they were hot. They had a great game. And so I think that gives you a little bit of boost too, that you kind of own that gym a little bit, walk in there like you own the place, settle in, execute.
So we'll talk about Princeton and Harvard, who will be the number 2 and number 3 seed respectively. But first, let's talk about the 4 seed. For anyone who isn't familiar with the Ivy League tournament format, only the top 4 teams make it to the tournament. So Jenn, who is competing for that 4 seed?
Yeah, so we're down to Penn and Brown for the number 4 seed, which is the same as it was last year for followers of the Ivy League. Penn started off slowly in league play, went 0-2, but has come on strong as of late. They've got a big 3 that's pretty good there too. Yeah, they've got a likely first-team All-Ivy player in senior Stina Almquist. They've got last year's Rookie of the Year in Matea Gale, and they have the presumed Rookie of the Year this year. I'm not sure it's super close with Katie Collins. So that's a really good trio of 1 guard and 2 front court players. And it really, Penn's going to go as far as those 3 can take them. And then Brown, they've had a really rough go with injuries. They've got 3 impact players right now who are currently out for the season, including players who either started last year or have started this year before getting hurt. So they've just kind of been gutting things out and fighting really hard. They're led by junior guard Grace Arnoley, who's averaging career highs in both points and assists and leads the team in both of those categories. So she's really their engine right now. And Brown's a scary team because they shoot a lot of threes. Their percentage isn't great, but if you catch fire on the right day in the postseason, like you can beat anybody. So that's definitely, for Columbia, the number 1 seed, if they face Brown, they'll really want to try to limit them from behind the arc in particular to slow them down.
And how will that last regular season weekend decide the final Ivy League tournament spot?
Yeah, so we could end up going down to the same tiebreaker as last year, which Brown lost. So we'll see if history repeats itself. But for Penn, it's easy. If they beat Princeton, they're in. I shouldn't say easy. It's simple. If they beat Princeton, they're in. Brown needs Penn to lose. Brown has to beat Yale. And they would then have to make up the difference between their net ranking and Penn's net ranking. Net ranking is the 3rd tiebreaker. for the Ivy League tournament, and the first two tiebreakers are going to be even in this scenario. So it would come down to the net ranking on Sunday morning, which would reflect games for Saturday. So they have, last I checked, about a 20-point difference in net ranking. So they would just need to close that gap, which would probably mean blowouts on both sides.
Well, thank you for all of that. But coming up next, we'll kind of talk about what's happening in the middle. We'll talk more about Princeton and Harvard, who are locked into the number 2 and number 3 seed, respectively. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. Prize Picks makes it simple. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. When you win, your money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes. No waiting around. Every Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25%, giving even more value to your lineup. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. So, as I mentioned in the last segment, Princeton is locked into the number 2 seed and Harvard in the number 3 seed. Starting off with Princeton, how did the team do it? Especially, we talked about it last time on the pod in November, losing Madison St. Rose in November.
Yeah, so Princeton's a really young team. They start 4 sophomores along with a senior who hadn't previously started a full season before. So lots of youth and lots of inexperience. But the good thing about a young, inexperienced team is there's usually a lot of upside. And we're seeing that with Princeton now as they, figure out their chemistry this late in the season, get used to those high pressure minutes and seem to be peaking at the right time. Offensively, they've got a ton of balance. They don't have like one go-to player that's the same in every game. They just beat Harvard in a battle for second place on Friday night. And in that game, all 5 of their starters scored in double figures. The other thing to note with them offensively is early in the season, facing a press, they were really turnover prone, and they've slowly gotten better at that as the season has gone on. So that's huge for them, particularly because Columbia and Harvard both press for most of the game, if not all of the game, full court. So that has been a major key for them. And then the defense has steadily improved. Princeton's always been known for its defense under Carla Berube. But they started off this season not a very good defensive team. They were in the bottom half of teams nationally in points allowed per 100 possessions. But now they are in the 81st percentile, back to close to where we're used to seeing them. That's just, again, like getting more comfortable with each other, stepping up that communication, knowing where each other's going to be. So, those are some places we've kind of seen Princeton grow into their roles and start to play beyond their years a little bit.
And then, what do you think are the keys for Princeton as they try to find success, not only in the final game of the regular season, but as they go to the conference tournament as well?
Yeah, so Princeton is playing at Penn to finish the season. And with Penn fighting for its Ivy League tournament life, that's definitely going to be a battle. Plus, there's the Princeton-Penn rivalry built in. Harvard-Princeton in the Ivy League tournament will probably be a de facto play-in game for the NCAA tournament. Winner could either, go get the automatic bid or be in consideration for an at-large, and the loser is probably going to drop out of the NCAA tournament field. So in that game, Princeton needs to continue to handle pressure and contain Harvard's 2 biggest scorers, guard Harmony Turner and forward Elena Rodriguez. And then if, Princeton advances and plays Columbia, presumably in the final, they really got to shut down Riley Weiss. The 34 points that they allowed to her were the most since they let Elena Deladon, I think folks have heard of her. Elena Deladon scored 35 points when she was at Delaware like 15 years ago. So shout out also to Columbia Athletics for that stat, which is a goodie. So.
And then switching gears to Harvard, are you surprised to see them as the number 3 seed this year? And how did they end up there? I know there were a lot of really good games between Princeton, Harvard, and Columbia in all of those combinations.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised to see Harvard as the number 3 seed. I thought that they had a chance to win the regular season title this year based on who they were bringing back, namely Harmony Turner and Elena Rodriguez. But, Harvard's been right there with Columbia and Princeton all year. In fact, Harvard has the best net ranking of the trio and has all season. So, it's just come down to a little bit of, a couple plays here, a couple plays there. For instance, the first Harvard-Princeton game was decided on an Ashley Chia buzzer beater for Princeton. So if that goes the other way, we'd be looking at a little bit of a shakeup in the standings. Things like that. They were able to beat Columbia on the road, which was a big win for them. But they've just continued to grow under head coach Carrie Moore. They were looking for something better than third place because they finished in third place the past couple of years, and were really looking to take that next step. But if you look at their underlying numbers, they have definitely taken steps forward, even though they're ending up in basically the same spot that they've been in the past couple of years. So I think it's going to be a great battle in the tournament and beyond.
That Ashley Chia buzzer beater feels like years ago. That's just how much fun we've had this Ivy League season. And then, what do you think are the keys for Harvard in finding success in the final game as well as the Ivy League tournament?
Yeah, so Harvard's going to Dartmouth for their final game. And I think that's an important tone setter for Ivy Madness. Dartmouth is at the bottom of the league, but has gotten better this year under head coach Linda Simino. And so for Harvard, it's about, can they improve the things that they weren't happy with in their last couple games, which those were mainly ball screen defense. Carrie Moore said they got shredded in ball screen defense. So they're going to want to clean that up for sure before the Ivy League tournament. And then their press, wasn't quite as lethal as it usually is against Princeton. And Carrie Moore said she wanted to, add a couple wrinkles, make that back to its usual level of effectiveness. So if they can work on those things, that would go a long way, and just keeping everybody healthy. And then, they just need to, have that belief. They've lost to Princeton twice this season, but they need to have the belief that they can do it when the time is right in the postseason. And, really commit to that in the way of their pressure. In a couple games this season, they've kind of pulled off the press a little bit and been a little bit cautious, including the first game against Columbia with all of those guards. They didn't want to leave them open on the backside to shoot 3-pointers. But typically Harvard is at its best when it is going all out and doesn't necessarily play as well when they pull off the press. So I think they've really got to go for it and embrace kind of that high risk, high reward strategy.
Who are some players to watch if people are maybe just turning into the Ivy League for the first time? Like, who should they be looking for in terms of X factors?
Yeah, so for X factors, players that I haven't mentioned, for Columbia, I'll pick Susie Raffu, who's a forward for them. She was huge in Columbia's first win over Princeton. She was going up against Princeton's Parker Hill, who had about 3 inches on her. And both of those players had great games, but Susie kind of gives Columbia an added dimension because Columbia overall is a relatively small team in the front court. But she has kind of that size and is the one who's typically tasked with guarding fives. So, the better she can be, that kind of raises their ceiling that way and gives them, different things that they can do beyond relying on their trio of really excellent guards. For Princeton, I think, just their size is an X factor. Parker Hill is 6'4", and then they bring Tabitha Amanze, who is also 6'4", off the bench. So they can pretty much play someone who's 6'4" all the time, which is something that not a lot of Ivy League teams can say. And, when they lost that first game to Columbia, Carla Berube was talking about, we kind of went away from going inside and we need to go inside more. And so I think, in the Ivy League tournament, they really need to make sure to kind of pick on the advantage that they see in there and keep going to it to be able to capitalize the most on it. And then for Harvard, I'd point to Sanaya Glenn-Bello. who's a wing player, supremely athletic, got a lot of length. She plays a big role in Harvard's full court press, which has contributed to one of the best defenses in the country this season. And she's, come on late in the last, month or so with her scoring. And she's really important to give Harvard that third scorer behind Harmony Turner and Elena Rodriguez, who are so good as a duo. But, if you're facing a team like Columbia, you really do want that third scorer to kind of round things out.
Well, coming up next, we'll talk about the rest of the teams in the Ivy League, as well as what Jen is excited for heading into the final week of the regular season and Ivy League tournament. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, as listeners know, we don't just talk and write about the top teams in the conference. Who are some names that we should know about that won't be making the Ivy League tournament this year?
Yeah, so I just mentioned Dartmouth. And for them, they've got a senior guard, Victoria Page, who's been one of the best scorers in the Ivy League this year. It's kind of a really nice story. Like, her teammates really seem to be playing for her, and she's been through a lot with this program. They've been struggling the past couple of years, and she's been there and been steady and continually gotten better and been through a couple coaching changes. So to see her have a strong senior year is a really nice story, and she'll get one more game to kind of show what she can do and wear that Dartmouth uniform at home. And then Yale, kind of a similar story. Senior Mackenzie Egger is just having a breakout year. Wasn't at all a big scorer her first 3 years, and now is just a machine. For my money, that's a first-team All-Ivy player. She's leading the league in rebounding. She's top 5 in scoring and several other categories. So it's really great to see her kind of put it all together. I have a feature on her at the Next from recently, if you're curious about learning more there. And then Cornell, too, has had a senior who's really taken strides. Summer Parker Hall, was in the rotation her first couple of years, but has really been efficient and part of a great post tandem with Emily Pape there at Cornell. So, I'm a sucker for a good senior having a great last year story. So shout out to those three as they wind down their careers.
And, diving in a bit deeper with a couple of those teams, how have you seen Cornell grow in year one under Emily Garner?
Yeah, Cornell's really battling in a lot of their games. They lost by, I believe it was 8 to Princeton fairly recently, just as an example. The offense has been a struggle this year, but the defense has been pretty good. They're starting to lay the foundation under Emily Garner, who had some great defenses at Division III Trinity over the past several years before coming to Cornell. And freshman guard Paige Engels has been a bright spot. She's won 2 Ivy League Rookie of the Week awards this year. And, it'll be exciting to see her grow in the program along with several other folks. Emily Pape's only a junior, so she'll come back next year and should have a really strong senior season. So that's exciting too. There's a lot of pieces there.
And then how has Dartmouth continued to grow in year 2 under Linda Simoneau?
Yeah, so this year has definitely been a building block for the future. I don't think it's a lost year. I think it's been a year of progress, even though the past couple games have been a little tough. So they started Ivy play 2-0, which was huge for them. It's the first time they've done that since 2009-10. Thank you, Dartmouth Athletics, for that one. I did not go track that down myself. And both of those wins came on the road. Those were against Penn and Brown, so two teams that are fighting to make it into Ivy Madness right now. So those are just two really good wins. They've really struggled since then, but those wins gave some hope, first of all, and they gave some proof of concept to a team that won 3 total conference games over the previous 3 seasons. So, they definitely struggled, but the road looks good for them. And, the returners this year knew the system coming in, which is a big difference from Linda's first year, and they'll continue to kind of stack that knowledge and potentially stack some more wins in the coming years.
Well, moving on, what excites you about the final weekend of the regular season?
Yeah, so it's going to be a little bit of chaos. Everyone's playing at the same time, which is fun. We see this in the WNBA sometimes on the last day of the regular season. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Brown and Penn. If you're an Ivy League fan, you'll probably want to split screen those and keep tabs on both at the same time. And I also think it's kind of fun that the last day of the regular season, we get your traditional travel partners and some good rivalries in the Ivy League. So it's Columbia, Cornell, Penn, Princeton, Harvard, Dartmouth, and Brown, Yale. So that kind of adds another fun layer to it that I think will be really exciting to watch. So 2:00 Eastern on Saturday is the hour to park yourself in front of ESPN Plus and keep tabs on how everything's shaken out.
I am going to need you to fill me in. I will be busy in the middle of the semifinals at the A10 tournament, but excited to check out those results when I come up for air. So 3 of the seeds are set. So I feel like I can ask you this, what excites you about the upcoming Ivy Madness tournament besides seeing me and other friends from the next up at Providence?
Yeah, friends. I hear there's lots of good food in Providence, so I'm getting ready. No, but on the court, it's going to be an equally great tournament. I'm very excited. It's probably the best top 3 we've ever had in the Ivy League tournament. All 3 teams have been top 50 in the net for most or all of the year, which, to my knowledge, has never happened before. I mean, the net's new, but even in older metrics, this is unprecedented and amazing for the Ivy League. So it's just going to be some great quality basketball. Columbia winning as the number 1 seed would be kind of a great story, capping their rise under Megan Griffith. But upsets would also be really exciting because Ivy Madness on the women's side has been pretty chalky over the years, with the notable exception of Harvard upsetting Columbia 2 years ago. But other than that, it's pretty much followed chalk. Number 1 seeds have won the tournament year in and year out. So either way, it's going to be some great storylines.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can the people find you and your work, and can you tease any stories they should be looking out for?
Yeah, so by this time this comes out, there should be a Brown story on a certain player that I already mentioned on this podcast in your inbox. I should have a preview of the Ivy League tournament coming to you shortly. And then stay tuned for coverage live from the Ivy League tournament in Providence with some amazing photos from the next photographer, Dominic Allegra. So I'm really excited about that. Happy March, everybody. You can find me on Blue Sky at Jenn Hatfield with 2 N's. You can find me on Twitter at Jenn Hatfield1. You can find the Next everywhere in existence, including at thenexthoops.com. However you keep on top of us, thank you for that. And looking forward to sharing a lot of words with you this month.
Yes, so many words left to be written this month, but can't wait for it. Thank you for joining me today, and thanks to our listeners for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And make sure to tune in tomorrow to hear from our WNBA draft crew, and every Monday through Saturday for more women's basketball coverage.